and the ominous rise of anarchism are warnings to the governments and the ruling class that the condition of the working classes in Europe is becoming intolerable, and that if a revolution is to be avoided, some steps must be taken to increase wages, reduce the hours of labor, and lower the price of the necessaries of life. The Wall Street Journal, a stock gamesters publication, commenting upon Lord Asbury's speech, said, "These words were spoken by an aristocrat and a member of the most conservative body in all Europe." It was the very beginning of the 20th century AD that the International Organization of the Socialists finally formulated their long-maturing policy on war. On May 21st, 1905, AD, when war threatened between Austria and Italy, the Socialists of Italy, Austria, and Hungary held a conference at Trieste and threatened a general strike of the working of both countries, and civil case was declared. Now, this is a very interesting time to be talking about AD, but now we are talking about precognition after death, but before Christ existed, and this general speech of stories brought forth by the Ascension Cosmos Oracles, as that time and space didn't exist and was a creation of humankind on this planet to tell points of origin as far as the directions of north, south, east, and west, and how one could tell a day based on how the sun came and went around the planet. And at one time, even though it was not thought of as round, possibly, it was that we could put a stick in the ground and make what was the first timekeeper, and we could tell day and night and where the sun rose and set, and that became a way of telling what we call time and space, based on cosmology, or where our planet is in relationship to the sun, which was worshipped as energy and that which gave us life and heat, and also made our plants that we learned on this planet to come and go. But in the beginning, and this was before the pyramids existed, those things from the heavens came existed, was the original infinity of all things that had an infinity of aura that we still to this day call it a curiosity or a mystery, because it is said to hold all that we exist in, above and below and inside and out, are all things, therefore, are created with this. And this has become the word of love and the energy of light for wisdom. So that is the L&L community that we speak of as channelers. Now, this may seem above and beyond those that don't study their spiritual essence or have time, because as I was speaking of those of the working class, William Randolph Hearst, a young California millionaire, a most powerful newspaper owner, and we may respect him dearly, but of course we can talk about socialist landslide that took place in the fall of 1912, but there was a factor held to swell the socialist vote and the destruction of Hearst. So that was a plutocracy find, but it cost Hearst $18 million a year to run his, which we are gradually getting back away from now in cyberspace with thought, conscious live streaming. And the sum, more or less, got back from the middle class in payment for advertising. So the source of his financial strength laid wholly on the middle class, which apparently some people in cyberspace and the connection of energy and light to space and time, we trust wholly on the working class to uplift the empirical study of higher classes or up-leveling in the game of life. But the people that had the trust did not advertise. So To destroy Hearst, all that was necessary was to take away from him his advertising, which advertising, public relations, you'll learn, is completely different in today's time, and live streaming, as well as archiving historical documentation, AC, DC, AD, BCE, and the way we speak of time and space and energy in the Ascension Age, which is now. And Juneteenth celebration in our federal holiday now, Juneteenth out of Galveston, Texas. And always, when I was a child, my mother moved us when I was 11 and 12 to Houston, and we went down to Galveston, which is an island, and we loved to ride the ferry. It was one of the few things that a mother with 6 children, soon to be 7 children, could do, and take her children over the ferry for a wonderful ride, feeding the seagulls bread, and then going and taking our fishing poles and fishing, but basically playing, and especially go to see the parade, or those that built picnics and barbecues and had an annual Juneteenth get-together, because we were all out of school. So it was the first celebrated holiday in Texas. More importantly, is Galveston, and with the Emancipation Proclamation of Lincoln freeing the slaves and giving us freedom. And so we all study freedom, and we all have knowledge now. But I'd like to speak about this following that Hearst had managed to take possession of the Democratic Party. He occupied an anomalous position, preaching an emasculated socialism combined with a nondescript sort of petty bourgeois capitalism. It was oil and water, and there was no hope for him, though a short period of his source of serious apprehension to the plutocrats. Now, the cost of advertising was amazing in those helter-skelter times, and the small capitalists completed. Therefore, they did the advertising, but there being no competition, where there was a trust, and there was no need to the trust, or no need for the trust to advertise. The whole middle class had not yet been exterminated. So the steady skeleton and the sturdy skeleton, one might say, remained, and it was built without power. The small manufacturers and small businessmen at the time who still survived were at the complete mercy of plutocracy. There were no economic nor political souls of their own when the fiat of the plutocracy went forth to withdraw their advertisements from the Hearst papers. Hearst made a gallant fight. He bought his papers, and he brought them out of a loss of $1.5 million each month. He continued to publish the advertisements for which he no longer received pay. Again, the fiat of the plutocracy went forth, and the small businessmen and manufacturers swamped him with a flood of notices that he must discontinue running their old advertisements. Hearst persisted. Injunctions were served on him. Still he persisted. He continued for 6 months imprisonment for contempt of court in disobeying the injunctions. While he was bankrupted by countless damage suits, he had no chance. The plutocracy had passed sentence on him. The courts were in the hands of plutocracy to carry the sentence out, and Hearst crashed also to destruction in the Democratic Party that he had so recently captured. With the destruction of Hearst and the Democratic Party, there were only 2 paths for his following to take. One was into the socialist, the other was into the Republican Party. Then it was that the socialists reaped the fruit of the Hearst pseudo-socialistic preaching, for the great majority of his followers came over to us. The expropriation of the farmers that took place at this time would also have swelled our vote had it not been for the brief and futile rise of the Grand Party. Ernest and the socialist leaders fought fiercely to capture the farmers, but the destruction of the socialist press and publishing houses constituted too great to handicap, while the mouth-to-mouth propaganda had not yet been perfected. So it was the politicians like Mr. Calvin, who were themselves farmers long since expropriated, captured the farmers, and through their political strength aware in a vain campaign. The poor farmers, Ernest once laughed savagely, the trust have them both coming and going. And this was really the situation, for the 7 great trusts working together had pooled their enormous surplus and made a farm trust. The railroads controlling rates and the bankers and stock exchange gamesters controlling prices had long since bled the farmers into indebtedness. The bankers and all the trusts, for their matter, had likewise long since loaned colossal amounts of money to the farmers. The farmers were in the net. All that remained to be done was the drawing in of the net. This the Farm Trust proceeded to do. The hard times of 1912 had already caused a frightful slump in farm markets here in the United States. Prices were now deliberately pressed down to bankruptcy, while the railroads, with extortionate rates, broke the bank of the farmer camel. Thus, the farmers were compelled to borrow more and more, while they prevented from paying back to their old loans. This ensued the great foreclosing of mortgages and forced collection of notes. The farmers simply surrendered the land to the farm trust. There was nothing else for them to do. Having surrendered the land, the farmers next went to work with the farm trust, becoming managers, superintendents, foremen, and common laborers. They worked for wages. They became villains, in short, serfs bound to the soil by a living wage. They could not leave their masters, for their last masters composed the plutocracy. They could not go on to the cities, for there also the plutocracy was in control. They had been only one alternative, to leave the soil behind, vagrants, and brief to starve. And even if they were frustrated, for stringent vagrancy laws were passed and rigidly enforced. So this could go on, and we see American farmers and small capitalists coming together. In the 20th century, there were practically none in ancient Rome. The destruction of the Roman yeomanry proceeded far less rapidly than the destruction of American farmers. Numbers of the farmers impelled by an insane lust for soil, willing to show the beast they would become, tried to escape expropriation by withdrawing from any and all market dealing. But they sold nothing. They bought nothing. Among themselves, a primitive barter began to spring up. The privation and hardships were terrible. It became quite a movement. In fact, the manner in which they were beaten were unique, local, and simple. The plutocracy, by virtue of possession of the government, raised their taxes. It was the weak joint in the armor, neither buying nor selling. They had no money, and at the end, their land was sold to pay the taxes. So the fall of the 1912, the socialist leaders, with the exception of Ernest, a big storm just blew in where I'm sitting in the panhandle of Gulf Breeze, Florida, at exactly 17:30, 5:30 Friday, the 18th, and we're studying those of us to come forward as the oracles, and the war cloud hovered disk, dark and ominous over here, the stage of the world catastrophe, of labor troubles, hard times, perishing middle classes, armies of unemployed, clashes of economic interest in the world market. This is all happening again. And Juneteenth, the freedom of the middle class, working class, slaves around the world are all upon us, and Mother Earth is cleansing, and very strong earthly cleansing right now where I'm sitting. I see ice pieces here, and it was so warm yesterday, but they're hitting little ice chunks in my window and sticking. So this must be inside a cloud. Well, folks, the 20th century came in, and an international organization of socialists finally formulated long-matured policy on war. which is happening right now, and we're trying to get rid of.